Welcome back. Today we are going to be discussing beating anxiety, particularly how you think affects how you feel. My name is Liv Mercer, and I am from the Counseling and Psychological Services Office at IU at the IU Health Center, 4th floor. So for today, we're going to be really exploring how your thoughts impact your feelings, and we'll talk a little bit about how that impacts your behavior too. So specifically, we're going to look at understanding and exploring common anxiety symptoms, understanding our personal emotional control strategies, discuss automatic thoughts and how they impact anxiety, and then understand and identify common cognitive distortions. Today you're going to need about 45 to 50 minutes available, so this pre-recorded webinar is going to function just like any of the live workshops you've attended before. However, for the journal prompts, you're going to be encouraged to pause the video to allow yourself time to answer the journal prompt questions. Because of this, you are going to need a pen and a piece of paper. Throughout this PowerPoint, like I said, there's going to be lots of journal prompts, and we want to ensure that you have the ability to write them down to really think through what might be coming up for you in available skills. Let's say you're not a writer, you don't like writing by hand. That's okay. Use either the notes section of your phone or feel free to type in a computer. Either one will work. So before we get started, I do want us just to take a peek at some of these common anxiety symptoms because it is important for us to understand what our personal experience might look like. So I want you just to briefly peek over each of these, and then there's one more slide, but we're going to come back to this one. Looking at the physical section, I think this is often what a lot of people experience or will become overly preoccupied with when they experience these symptoms. So the increased heart rate can lead to people believing that they're dying or having a heart attack, shortness of breath, chest pain. But it's also important that we think about how anxiety can impact our behaviors, our thoughts, so that difficult concentration, feeling confused, maybe some really difficult memories, thinking really worst case scenario, as well as emotional symptoms too. And if there are any symptoms you experience that you're not seeing on this list, that's okay. Just take mental note of it and remember to write them down. For our first journal questions, I want you to think about your anxious experience and what types of thoughts, physical sensations, and feelings do you have when you feel nervous or anxious, wound up, or on edge. Pause the video to record your responses. If we're speaking about anxiety, it's really important that we do also talk about control because often anxiety relates to feelings of a lack of control or a desire to have control and a lot of fear of the unknown. So typically when people are coming to therapy or logging on to do a workshop like this, it's because they want to feel better. Naturally, of course, right? People try hard to avoid and then get rid of those bad or negative thoughts or feelings, which is essentially what we call emotional control. You're trying to control your emotional response. Now, this is a strategy that is readily reinforced by our society. Our society is very much fixers. So if you get a shirt and it's too big or too small, you can just send it back and return it or bring it back to the store to return it. So if there's an issue, we can typically solve it. And so our society, and ourselves included, try to apply those same principles to ourselves. We try and control negative things from happening. So we spend a lot of time and energy on these emotional control strategies. Primarily, as a result, those behaviors are motivated by avoidance. So, for example, if you think in worst possible case scenario, you'll feel prepared for anything, and I won't be so hurt if something goes wrong. What's really important about understanding your emotional control strategies is that it allows you to have understanding about what those coping strategies are, but I'm going to encourage us to take steps further to really identify, okay, is this helping me and is this enriching my overall life? So the reality of this is when we think about anxiety and emotional control, people tend to spend way more time trying to control what they can't. That might be things like the future, how other people think or feel about them, and we miss basically everything else that we can control, which is our personal perception, our behaviors, coping strategies, so on and so forth. Similarly, people also tend to inappropriately or overly use control strategies, which can just increase distress and deplete overall quality of life. And this last bit is what's really important. Is sometimes procrastination avoidance strategies like that can be helpful coping strategies, but if we're not using it to the degree that it's actually helpful for us, that's when it starts to deplete our quality of life and cause distress. So there might be instances in which avoiding it because you are way too anxious is the best case scenario for you. And then other times where that avoidance and chronic avoidance can lead to additional anxiety in the long run. So we want to try and understand our emotional control strategies and truthfully really understand them from more of a non-judgmental perspective, because sometimes these control strategies work and other times they don't, and we want to really be able to identify that. I want you to start thinking about your emotional control strategies. So what are you trying to do to control your anxiety? And how does that control strategy or those control strategies work in terms of helping you control the anxiety in the short term and in the long term? That's the important piece, is looking at both. Pause the video to record your responses and then just press play when you're ready to move on. Another set of journal questions includes, what are your control strategies costing you? So think about, are they costing you a very enriched and valued lifestyle? Is it costing you in terms of your relationships, in terms of your quality of academic, social functioning? Is it costing you your ability to really get past some of this anxiety or reduce it? What is it costing you? And then for all these emotional control strategies, what do you think might be more helpful? Pause the video to record your responses and press play when you're ready to move on. So let's get into the main crux of it. How we think does affect how we feel. So what I want to start out by talking about is something that I call the cognitive behavioral diamond. So this is essentially a chart that really helps us understand how our thoughts impact our feelings and our behavior, but there's also a physiological component. So how does our overall body play a role too? So if we wake up very tired, or particularly with anxiety, those very physical symptoms, how might that be involved in that cycle too? So what I mean is that the way in which somebody perceives a thought can impact their emotional experience. And then that experience can trigger behaviors, and that overall connection between thought, emotion, and behavior has a tendency to either hurt you or help you. So think about it for you before we move on. How do you think your thoughts impact your feelings? And how does that overall impact how you behave? This chart should explain it a little bit further. This is taken from the Anxiety Toolbox workbook that IU does do, and we adapted that from Purdue, and Purdue adapted that from Cal Poly, so credit is due there. But I want you to particularly focus on this bottom part of it. So this really does a great job kind of laying out what that looks like. So when you are feeling really anxious, what went through your mind? What was that thought component? And thinking in terms of words can be very hard for people. When you had that thought, what emotional experience did you have? Did you feel frustrated, rejected, guilty, ashamed? And as a result of both of those things, what happened behaviorally? What was your first instinct? What did you do? What did you avoid doing? So on and so forth. And then think about your physical experience. How did that play a role? Did your heart start beating fast, and did that trigger even more of a desire to leave, etc.? This top section, the situation, can be really important when you're trying to dig into what your anxious experience looks like. It can be very helpful for us to what I call play detective and understand what your anxious trigger is, and then start identifying, okay, how am I typically responding to those triggers? What am I thinking? How am I feeling? How am I behaving? And is that helping it or not helping it? And if it's not, what could be more helpful for me to do instead? This is where that control strategy piece can often come into play, because if you're feeling really overwhelmed, your desire is to boom, try and do something else that is going to immediately mitigate that anxious or emotional response. So if we think about that concept of how we think affects how we feel, it is important for us to talk about automatic thoughts. So there are thoughts that go through your head every single day that are very purposeful. And then there are plenty of other thoughts that pop into your head just like a reflex. You can't control it. Now, some of those thoughts are helpful, some we don't even give another passing glance to, and then other ones can really hurt us and can trigger that very unhelpful anxious cycle. So an example of an automatic thought might be you see a car in the street and you think, oh, that's cool, just popped into your head automatically. Another one might be, oh shoot, I need to remember that thing, or even a specific memory from the past. I don't know about any of you, but if you've ever just been sitting there and had the most embarrassing memory from elementary school just pop into your head, it's like, hey brain, I didn't ask for this, I didn't ask for you to pop up. That can be an example of an automatic thought. And because thoughts are just that, they're automatic, it can be very difficult to intervene on them where we'd ideally like to. A lot of people come into my office and they say, I just don't want to think this way anymore. And then they get frustrated when they can't make those thoughts just switch really quickly. And the trouble is they're trying to intervene on something that is so automatic and is so immediate, which can be very, very difficult. But I want to paint this picture just to help you understand how these automatic thoughts can impact your overall emotional experience. So we can have automatic thoughts about our internal experiences too. So thinking back to those physical symptoms, you might have the indication of my heart is racing, I must be having a panic attack. While somebody else might have the automatic thought, my heart is racing, I must be excited. For that same internal experience, two people had two very different automatic thoughts. Now think about it. What feelings do you associate with both? With the panic attack, you might associate overwhelmed, frustrated, annoyed with yourself, scared, so on and so forth. As opposed to being excited, you probably are associating very different emotions. So as you can imagine, if you think back to that original cycle, this whole process, this automatic thought leading to a very different emotional response could even lead to a very different emotion, not emotion, but behavior. Same thing can happen with external situations. So let's say you're walking on campus. You have a friend that you typically see every day. They wave at you, they smile, you chit-chat for a little while, but this time they don't wave at you or smile at you. Truthfully, they don't even look at you. You could have many automatic thoughts, but let's just use two for an example. The first one can be, they must hate me. Now, if you have that automatic thought, that is probably going to evoke some frustration, fear, anxiety, probably a more what we deem to be negative emotional experience. Let's say you were supposed to go to that friend's home or to a party that they were at that night, and if they didn't smile at you and you thought, boom, they must hate me, and that increased a lot of negative emotions, that might actually lead you to not attending that party, which might cause a whole nother subset of difficult thoughts, emotions, behaviors, and might contribute to a really difficult, anxious, and maybe even depressive cycle for you. On the flip side, if you thought, oh, maybe they didn't see me, I wonder what's going on, you might feel concerned. I hope that friend is okay. You might feel pretty complacent or pretty neutral. You may not experience as many negative emotions towards yourself in that overall situation, which means you might still feel comfortable going to that party tonight or reach out to them. Again, can correlate to a very different type of behavioral experience. Same external stimuli, different automatic thought, which can lead to a very different subset of emotions and behaviors. So now that we've chatted about automatic thoughts, I want you to think about what are some examples of automatic thoughts for you. Maybe you have types of automatic thoughts that you think of all the time, or maybe there was a particular situation where you had an automatic thought. What about these thoughts are unhelpful for you, and what feelings do you associate with these thoughts? Pause the video to record your responses, and when you're ready, please press play. So all of these automatic thoughts can usually be placed into what we call categories of cognitive distortions. So cognitive distortions are essentially common thinking styles that everybody engages in. And truly, what's in bold print, when I say everyone, I mean everyone. Every single person in the world engages in cognitive distortions, myself as a counselor included. So we'll go through charts of all of these things, and when we get there, I do encourage you, take screenshots, or feel free to Google search these yourself, because being able to have a chart of this can be really helpful. But one of the most commonly used thinking styles is something we call catastrophizing. It's essentially like the snowball effect. So this might happen to you when you sit down to start studying for a test. You are automatically thinking, I'm going to fail this. I suck. I'm so stupid. And then suddenly you're thinking you're going to fail the course. And then you're like, God, if I fail the course, then I'm going to fail out of school. And if I fail out of my school, my parents are going to hate me. And if my parents hate me, then they're going to evict me from their house. And they're going to cut me off financially. And I don't even know what I'm going to do. And the world is going to collapse. We just went from 0 to 60. People often do that. They often think worst case scenario and catastrophize, and usually our anxiety is going to go up and up and up the more worst case scenario those thoughts get. So I'm going to go through a list of this chart of cognitive distortions and available coping strategies. When you see one that you identify with, I encourage you, jot it down. And you might notice that sometimes you think in a combination of these cognitive distortions, and that's okay too. So the first is all or nothing thinking. So you're really seeing things as very black and white rather than on a continuum. So either I failed or I succeeded, either I'm good or I'm bad, either I can take care of myself all the way or not at all, either I need to be anxious or not anxious entirely, very black and white. So our challenge for you for a coping technique is to learn to find a continuum for evaluating yourself. What's the good? What's the bad? What's the neutral? What is everything? So it's probably not possible that I am really either good or bad. What is the in-between? What am I missing out on? Try and think about that. Overgeneralization is another cognitive distortion, and this is essentially where we are perceiving a pattern of negative events due to a single incident. So I'm trying to think of a quick example. This might be where, for example, you see that friend and they didn't wave at you and you're like, they hate me, they never look at me, they never wave at me. When in actuality, you're just completely forgetting that they waved at you every other time besides that one. So we want to encourage ourselves to evaluate events for similarities and differences. Does this happen all of the time or only some of the time or maybe only just once? Mental filter, so picking out a negative detail and dwelling on it excessively. In instances like this, it could be you got an 85%, and instead of focusing on just the things that you did right and the things that you did wrong, you're just hyper-focused on where are all those red marks? What did I get wrong? Oh, I was so terrible. I can't believe that I did that. I screwed that up. Or I'm always failing these things, so on and so forth. Really dwelling on the negatives. You might have a positive or neutral whatever interaction with a friend, and you're hyper-focused on the couple of weird things or awkward moments that might have happened. So a great way to cope with this is to expand your awareness to include other details. Question, is this the full truth? If somebody else experienced the same situation, what might they think about it? What might they interpret differently? What else could be going on? What could I be missing? Another cognitive distortion is discounting the positive. So rejecting the experience as positive and insisting that it doesn't count to maintain a negative belief. So you absolutely killed it at presentations. You feel like you usually suck at them and you get so nervous when you stand up there, and you absolutely killed it. You got so many positive compliments and great feedback from your professor, and instead of really taking that in, you're like, yeah, well, it was just a one-time thing. I suck at them. That's not going to make a difference. I suck at them anyways. Whew. That's going to be a hard one. That is often what we call engaging in confirmation bias. So really taking in information in a way that reinforces that thought, whether positive, negative, or neutral. So I encourage you to identify all parts of a given situation. So what was the good? What was the bad? What was the neutral? What are all of the times I gave the presentations? Sure, Some of them might not have gone great, in my opinion, but what were the ones that went okay? What were the ones that I actually kicked butt on? Try and offer yourself a truly objective interpretation of what is actually going on rather than just hyper-focusing on the negative and discounting the positives. Jumping to conclusions, I think this one is pretty self-explanatory, so just jumping to a conclusion, even if there are no definite facts to support it. So questioning, are there other interpretations of the event? Are there other ways that this event can go? Is that the worst case scenario? Well, what's the best case scenario? What's a neutral way of viewing it? So on and so forth. Mind reading is a big one. So essentially concluding that you know how someone feels about you and you don't bother to find the facts. So like that example I gave several slides ago with someone not seeing you, mind reading and jumping to conclusions is they hate me. Okay, so what's the evidence there? How do I know that they actually hate me? What else could be an interpretation? Is there any evidence to refute your assumption? And I always encourage you could always consider asking the person. You could always go up to that friend and say, hey, I saw you and we didn't stop or get to connect. Is everything going okay? What's coming up for you? And they might be able to let you know, oh yeah, shoot, I just got word from my mom that my family dog died and I'm really upset about it. I was just trying to think about that for a while. And then you know, oh, okay, they don't hate me. That actually had nothing to do with me. So sometimes getting that concrete feedback can be really good for negating that cognitive distortion. Fortune teller error is kind of similar to the mind reader one, but this is essentially just with like life. You're just anticipating things are going to turn out badly and you're convinced it's an established fact. So what that means is I already know I'm going to fail. Why would I even bother trying? I know I'm not going to get the job. Oh, I know that it's going to be awkward. It's absolutely going to suck. So if you're thinking that thing, it might lead you to wanting to avoid it. Oh, I'm not going to get the job anyways. Everybody's better than me. I'm a terrible candidate. Do you think you're likely going to apply for the job? I know I wouldn't. So in those instances, knowing, again, that thought can impact the feeling and subsequently the behavior, we want to challenge ourselves to come up with a list of alternative outcomes. Okay, maybe there are better candidates out there. Maybe I won't get the job. And what else could happen? What is the neutral? What is the good? Can I look at this on a continuum? What are all of the outcomes that are available? We already talked about catastrophizing, but these often come up in a lot of what if related thoughts. So what I encourage people to do for this is calculate the probability, maybe you want to go 1 out of 10 or 1 out of 100, that the worst case scenario will actually happen. You might even encourage yourself, come up with a concrete plan. If that absolutely happens, what can I do to get myself out of it? That might be actually answering those what if questions. Okay, so what if I do fail? What if I don't find success? Then what happens? And a great way to do this is I'll encourage people to flip the what if to an even if, because that creates just a little bit more space for people to feel like they can answer it. So even if I fail, you can tell that there's already that little kind of like underline where you can fit in your response there. Even if I fail, I know that I have the support and the resources to be able to figure out what to do next, as opposed to usually people are just stuck on what if I fail, what if I fail, what if I fail. Emotional reasoning is assuming that your negative emotions necessarily reflect the way things are, or they reflect like facts about you. So I feel stupid, therefore I am stupid. I encourage people to separate objective facts from emotional beliefs, because facts and feelings are not the same thing. You might feel stupid, but that doesn't mean you are stupid. And I think that's my last slide. And then should statements. So I absolutely dislike the word should. A lot of my personal clients know this, just because it implies something that we might not do, and usually something negative, like, oh, I should be better than that, or I should work out today. I encourage that should is kept for grammatical purposes. Like, I should leave my house early because there's a detour on the way to work. Rather, trying to ensure that your statements represent preferences rather than vital needs. So I would like to improve my grade rather than I should improve my grade. Some people might not relate to this as much. I just think should implies a lot of negativity, and I've noticed that for a lot of other students too. Mislabeling, so similar to the emotional reasoning one, mislabeling is that instead of describing your error, you attach a negative label to yourself and to another person. I suck, rather than, oh my gosh, that was so difficult. Like, I'm so bad at math. I'm a failure. I'm awful. So very similarly, separate those objective facts from emotional beliefs. Asking the question, am I basing this off of fact or feeling, can usually help separate that for students. And then personalization is our last one. So you see yourself as the cause of an external event that you likely weren't responsible for. So this could be, let's say you and your friends plan to go for a bike ride on a Saturday, and you were the one who came up with the idea, and it's raining out, it's pouring out on the Saturday, and you text all your friends like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, it's raining, I shouldn't have suggested it. Whoa, there you are taking responsibility for the weather, when in actuality, you had absolutely no control over the weather. You had no control over the fact that it was going to rain, so on and so forth. So I encourage you, if there's space for you to take responsibility where you actually can or need to, okay, great. But for the most part, challenge yourself to find alternate sources of responsibility. If you're apologizing for the weather, that's not your fault. You didn't want it to rain. You didn't ask for it to rain. So the alternate source of responsibility can go to Mother Nature. Reflecting on all of those, I want you to think about what types of cognitive distortions you find yourself identifying with. So as I went through that, what were the ones that popped up in your head? What did you write or type down? And then how can you use coping strategies to find holes in your thinking? Pause the video to record your responses, and when you're ready, please press play. So I hope that this video was helpful for you in terms of beginning to understand cognitive distortions, emotional control strategies, and ultimately just how powerful our thoughts are, just how they can impact the way we feel and therefore behave, and how that ultimately doesn't help us a lot of times. Let's say you do need more. There are ways to determine if additional services are needed, and that can be increases in other mental health symptoms, any changes to appetite, sleep hygiene, any reduced academic, social, or work functioning, or any thoughts of self-harm, suicide, or homicide. Those can be good indicators that additional support would be needed. So I'm going to just briefly highlight several options that are available at the IU community. The first is a counseling and psychological services office. So that's where I work. We have individual and group counseling available. We have couples counseling sessions too, and psychiatry. Let's say you call to make an appointment, you can't get in for a couple of weeks, or you are scheduled to see your therapist recurringly, but an emergency happens. You have access to us via the phone 24 hours, 7 days a week, just by dialing 812-855-5711. Select option 1 for after hours. And then anytime that the CAPS office is physically open, we have emergency appointments available, which is Monday through Friday, 8 until 4:30 p.m. Now, I will note it will be most important that you do keep up with us on our website just to keep track of any changes that could be happening to our hours, to our schedule, or to our service offerings. Let's say it's not an emergency and you don't think you need ongoing counseling. You just want to talk with someone a bit more about maybe something we discussed today or any other stressor in your life. We do have free drop-in appointments. They're called Let's Talk Now, and I'll talk about it a little bit more in the next slide. We also offer sexual assault counseling with our SACS counselors, and we have many other free workshops, including Monday Motivators and other online workshops like this one, or pre-recorded videos too, or live. So our Let's Talk Now program basically includes spaces for students to have brief consultations. So what you're able to do is you're able to use our website, go to the Let's Talk Now portion, and see where our counselors are located for that semester. Typically, we have counselors located at the Student Academic Center, Hudson Holland, LGBTQ plus Culture Center, and you do not need to identify with any of those centers to go. And we have several CAPS counselors who go to each of those locations a couple hours a week, and you're able to just see where they're at, Show right up, sit down, and you get 30 minutes just to start talking. If from there you think that was enough, great. Feel free to utilize it again when you need it. If not, they can help connect you to formal counseling if you two deem that that might be appropriate. Let's Keep Talking is a formal counseling portion of CAPS, but this is targeted at serving traditionally underserved student bodies. So these are located at most of our culture centers on campus: Asian Culture Center, La Casa, Neil Marshall, Group Scholars, OIS, as well as DEMA. And I encourage you to call CAPS to schedule an appointment or visit that culture center, and you can always ask them for more information too, or call CAPS as well. An extension of CAPS is our sexual assault crisis services. So these are counselors that are employed by CAPS who have specific trauma-informed experience, and they specialize in working with those who have experienced sexual violence. So this is a free counseling service available for anybody who has experienced something that they would deem to be sexual assault, harassment, dating violence, stalking, domestic assault, so on and so forth. If you think that could be a main part of what you're looking to discuss in counseling, then this could be a good service option for you. So these services do include individual and group counseling, support groups, psychiatry care, and then information and assistance with medical, judicial, or legal issues. They're available for all genders and all identities, and if you would like to speak with a sex counselor or receive any after-hours crisis services, you can dial the SACS after-hours crisis line at 812-855-8900. And last but not least, one last service on campus is actually called the Center for Human Growth. The Center for Human Growth is not affiliated with CAPS, but they do have other service options that are available, as well as evening hours too. So you are welcome to give them a call at the number that's listed if you'd like to get to know their services as well. Thank you for attending today's workshop. I look forward to hopefully having you all log on to many more in the future.